Hello and welcome to DS Fisheries. I'm fishing on the Golden Oaks Lake and it's a venue I've never seen before, I've never been to, never fished it, but I'm here today to try out some of my winter tactics and to pass on to you some words of winter wisdom. Now, before I start, I'm going to get a brew and then I'm going to tell you all about it. I think my first winter tip would be make the brews a regular thing. Keep your hands warm, keep you comfortable on what can be cold and miserable days. I often have to think a great deal when asked to talk about certain things. And so many people put so much importance in rigs, in bait, in the clothes that you're wearing, and the way that you sleep in the winter. And none of those things are as important as first finding your fish. Walker said it all those years ago in Stillwater Angling. He wrote in 1953, and it's as right then as today as it was back then. There's less people fishing in the winter. It gives you time to have a look at the water. In a lot of respects in the summer, certainly on busy day ticket waters, the first thing you do is drive into the nearest swim and try and make your best effort. In the winter, there's less people. You get time to walk around, and where you see fish, that's where you want to be fishing. Location is, it's not just finding the fish either, is it? It's finding the right place to put your hook bait. I think one of the most important things are features. I know there's lots and lots of lakes that are absolutely featureless, and your baited area becomes the feature that the carp hopefully will react to. But variations in depth, I think, can be a massive bonus when you're searching carp. The tops of bars, the bottom of the bars, tops of plateaus, there's the sides of the plateaus. They're all areas that you can explore. One in the shallower water, and I would concentrate on those areas simply because they warm up quicker than the deeper areas. Deeper areas can be good up to sort of December time, but when that water gets cold, really cold, what happens to it? It's like hot air. Hot air rises, cool air drops to the bottom. It's the same with water that sinks to the bottom. So the deeper areas, to me in the winter, I rarely look at. I'm looking at the shallower areas that respond to the sun coming out, to movement that the wind creates, churning up the bottom and hopefully keeping the carp moving. So those are the things that I'm looking for. I think one of the greatest things I ever see in carp fishing is when I'm looking for a spot and I'll cast around with a lead, is to reel that lead back in with clay on it. Once I find clay, that's where I'm going to fish. And it just thrills me to find a bit of clay. And whilst we're talking about clay, and all the flanking they do on it, what they are doing is clay is full of minerals that the carp can absorb into their skin. There's also in the winter the problem they've got when they go dormant in dying weed or whatever are the water leeches that come out. Sometimes when I've caught carp, they're absolutely covered in the damn things, but they can scrape away those leeches, and it's not like gravel. It's not going to tear up their skin. But the clay will help them to shed those parasites from their body. Yeah, an amazing substance. If I can find it in a lake, that's where I'm going to fish. I generally always fish in the silt anyway, right next to the gravel features, where I think, obviously the gravel's a little higher than where the silt is, then all the natural food and even the bait we put in is going to roll down into that silt. So that's why I always fish those areas. Probably second on my list of things to do when I get to a lake is, and a lot of people probably not even realise this, is the bird life that's on the lake. If there's plenty of coots and tufted ducks, then they'll tell you where all the bait is that hasn't been eaten. You'll see them concentrating on areas, and you'll know there's bait there. Certainly, they don't come up with it in their mouths anymore. Tufties, they swallow it before they get to the surface, otherwise they get their heads beaten when they get to the top. But yeah, tufties and coots feeding on bait. And if coots are doing it, I've thought over the years there's a massive symbiotic relationship between carp and coots. Tufties I don't think they like, but coots they do. And I used to cast, well I still do, cast zigs into areas where the coots were diving, and a lot of times it produced fish. But the bird life is a massively important thing. And one bird that I think everybody ignores, other than sort of it's a very beautiful bird, is the grebe. Now, little fish are the same as big fish. They, little fish are like big fish. They follow the features on the lake. You know, we all think of a gravel bar where, you know, it could be warm on the top, so the carp are going to be there on a sunny day. On a less sunny day, they might move down where those water level, where the water temperature might be slightly different. Well, little fish are going to do the same, and grebes follow the features on the lake. They follow the edge of the weed beds, you know, picking off the fish that they need to eat. So don't just disregard grebes. Look at them for a while, and invariably I cast where they've been swimming around for a while, up and down a bar or something, and you'll find something there of interest. And normally I will put a hook bait there, and that's where my free offerings will go, depending on the time of year. You know, a spot or two, or a few more spots in the warmer weather. But in the winter, it's a massive thing. Watch where those grebes are going. Watch where the coots and the tufties are diving. And the other thing, mallards are absolutely scared to death of carp. And so often I see them they're trying to dive now, aren't they, mallards? They were never supposed to be a diving bird. And they'll come out the water flying when they bump into a carp. And I've seen that so many times. They're just little indications of, one, where you should be fishing, and two, where the fish actually are. You might not see them jumping, but I've seen mallards, you know, backing off. Coots do the same. They'll come up, step in the water and squeaking away and trying to frighten the carp off. And I'm not sure who's more frightened, the carp or the bird, to be honest with you. But they're indications of where the bigger fish are, which invariably are carp and the things that we want to fish for. So number two, keep your eyes on the bird life. They'll tell you a bundle of knowledge, and knowledge is the thing that catches your carp. For this session, coming to Essex, fishing the Golden Oaks Lake, and not having been here before, it gets you thinking. I asked Danny, the owner of the lake, a few questions about the lake itself, and but the biggest thing for me is we've all just suffered a storm, and who the hell calls a storm Bert? But that's what we had, with up to, I think, somewhere in places 78 mile an hour winds, which is an incredibly strong wind. But what that strong wind does is the effect it has on a lake. Now, it's not necessarily the done thing in winter to follow the wind. You know, wherever the wind blows, the carp will be. You know, horrible. I have caught in horribly cold easterlies on the wind, but more on the back of it in a cold wind. Now, this is a big southerly, southwesterly wind. The air is incredibly warm, and it's been smashing into this bank for 2 days. You can see the water is quite churned up and quite murky, and what that does, it hits that bank and rolls down, and it's rolling down across the bottom, churning things up that are uncovering food for the fish. Also, the water is very well oxygenated, and to my mind, this is exactly where the fish are going to be. It's 26 foot deep in front of me, and I wasn't going to go and fish in 26 foot of water, because I think that's where all the cold water is at this moment in time. So it ended up at 13 wraps out, just on the end of the island off of it. There's about 15 foot of water there, 14, 15 foot of water, and it seemed the ideal place to set a trap. And what I did, I put one rod to the left, one to the right, and I've just baited in the middle. So those two hook baits are just on the outside. I don't know if the carp are going to come in and just, smash that bait to pieces and eat it all, or they're going to be cautious. And I think with two hook baits on the outside, I've got all the options covered. Thankfully, there's a 3-rod limit on here. So the third rod, sometimes they can almost be just done as a matter of course, but I want that to be as fishing as effectively as it can be. And I'm fishing down the margins, and I had to cast around a little bit, but I found one spot with some clay on it. So I clipped my rod up, and I've cast around it, and it doesn't seem to be so sharp a slope there. So the bait I put there isn't going to just roll off down to the bottom of the slope into 20 foot of water. So I've got a hook bait out there, again, stiff link pop up on the spot, 3 or 4 spods on top of it, and it's ready to rock and roll. For me, it's the presentation of my hook bait that is paramount when it comes to casting out or on the spots that I've found. Let's look at what happens during autumn and early winter. All millions of leaves blowing onto lakes. They go over to one corner or all the different areas, and eventually they sink to the bottom, covering the whole bottom with dead leaves. In high winds that we've just had, things breaking off, twigs and branches going in and sinking. And it all adds up to detritus on the bottom of the lake, things that can hinder your presentation. Now, as I've said before, I'm not the greatest follower of fashions in rigs. I've found a couple of things that really work for me. And the rig that I'm going to show you is it's set up as a helicopter rig, and it's called a stiff link pop-up. Other people give them their little names, but in essence it's a stiff link pop-up. And the reason I use it is because it ties in with the kind of fishing that I do. First of all, we'll come to the presentation in a second, but the presentation is perfect. I use a fair amount of boilies in my fishing all year round. Eventually, once I know they're eating them on a lake in the winter, then I can start introducing them a little bit more. And what boilies do, because they spread out and they're individual little blobs of bait all over the bottom, they encourage carp to move between mouthfuls. And a carp is infinitely more catchable when it's moving between mouthfuls than one that's just sucking on a little pile of pellets or hemp. I like the carp to be moving between mouthfuls. It's just my personal preference, the way that I hope things are moving below the surface. This is my stiff link pop-up presentation. It's my go-to rig when I'm boilie fishing, and the up section, if you want to call it that, of the stiff link is the short chod rigs from Fox. They're wonderful little things, and I never thought I would use rigs that aren't tied by me, I can assure you, but they are absolutely fantastic and tied a lot better than I can tie them. I've had to crush the barb on this one. Where we're fishing is a barbless only rule, and the only ones I've got with me are the size 5s, which aren't in barbless, and I've just crushed it down. Very, very easy to do. You just move around just behind the point, don't touch the point at all, and just nestle it right down, and it actually disappears. We've got my counterweight there in rig putty, the tungsten putty. And I've got a 30-pound Illusion boom section. Now, a lot of people go on about use a softer boom section because it'll lay it over the detritus on the bottom. And I've found that nothing is better if you've got thick stuff on the bottom you're trying to fish over. Then all you do with a helicopter setup is move your stops up further. And then the hook bait and the hook link is held further back and will come to rest on everything. The thing with a stiff boom section it takes the hook bait away from the lead as far as it can. So as soon as that goes into a fish's mouth, the lead comes into play, which is exactly what I want. I don't fish chod rigs. I don't like them. I don't really go with that setup so close to a lead. But this is absolutely perfect and has worked everywhere I go. I use as big a lead as I possibly can. This is a 3.5 ounce distance lead. And then you've got the buffer sleeve, the helicopter buffer sleeve fits over the top of that, and the swivel is protected from the knot there. The knot is protected from the swivel. And that's it. I balance it down as much as I can, so it sinks like slowly as humanly possible. And you might have noticed that bit of yellow on top. Sometimes I use the mainline toppers. This is a little bit of plastic, and it's there. I'm not a great believer that carp are into colours or anything. I think if you put it in the right place, it's going to get taken. But to edge my bets, there's a little bit of a sight bob, if you like, because I'm going to include sweet corn in my free offerings. And that's it. It's very, very simple. Yeah, the amount of fish it's caught me is amazing, certainly in the winter months. Okay, time for a little bit of a sit rep on the session, and I've had a lot of things confirmed in the last sort of hour. I've been fishing for 4 hours now. We came in here, the wind's obviously piling in here, and it's done its job. I got them set up on the shallower areas. There's a bar that runs all the way around into that margin. I've got it all on the top and in the margin. They're all at about 14, 15 feet. Baited with that combination of stuff, and I saw carp just very near the longer spot. A little while later we saw one come out twice very near to the margin rod, and whilst we were discussing what I'd seen, another one came out very near to that spot. I've also had a couple of liners, and because there's no other fishing here apart from a few pike, I would thought that came from carp. Big old slow lazy liners, and a wonderful indication there's some carp around. And to be quite honest with you, I don't think I could have got it better. In my book, the way that I fish, I think it's worked out very well, and I couldn't ask for more, could I? Maybe one in the bottom of my net might make it better. We'll wait and see. Over the years, I think it's probably pretty obvious that I am predominantly a boilie angler. I've taken 15 and 10 mil boilies from mainline all around the world to all different kinds of environments, and had great success with using them, along with the corresponding response pellets that break down so quickly in the water. They're always kicking off that smell of your bait, which is a wonderful asset. But I've come to a water that I'm not familiar with. I've never seen it before. I know very, very little about it. Yes, I will use the boilies in my mix, but I will add a few things along the way just to spice it up. One, it makes it a much more interesting baited area. There are no silverfish in here, so I've got nothing like silverfish pecking away at it, attracting the carp in to get their lion's share of the feast. So I want it to be kicking off a little bit more. I want them to know that it's there. The first thing I'm going to use is the response pellets. Put a healthy dose of them in the bottom of your bucket. The next thing I'm going to add is some sweet corn. Now, the sweet corn's there. I've never ever been convinced that sight is a major issue. Colours become popular because lots of people use the same colour on waters. I saw it through the 90s with yellow. Everybody seemed yellow, and I was using Active 8 back then, 18 mil and 15 mil bottom baits, and I caught just as much as anybody else. So I'm not sure sight is a thing, but I'll cover every pocket if I can. So sweet corn does that. I mean, it's got a smell they absolutely adore, and it's a very bright yellow. It gives you options on your hook bait front. The next thing is some boilies. I put some 10 and 15 mil boilies in there. You can crush them up if you want to. You can do whatever you want, but I like just a few 15 millers, a few 10 millers, all whole. Again, it gives you options for hook baits. Maybe a couple of 2 or 3 10 millers on a hair. A 15 and a 10 miller, whatever. It gives you options for hook baits again to change things up, and it increases your confidence the more you can work at it. The next thing is some juices to keep it all together. This stuff I came across when they were testing it all, a few years ago on the North Lake at Yateley, and I found it absolutely amazing. And you just squirt the old Cell Smart liquid all over it, mix it all up, get it all mixed in lovely. You ain't got to use loads and loads, just enough so everything's coated in it. And then let that soak in for a little bit, and it gives it that added attraction. And lastly, I'm not the greatest lover of maggots, to be honest with you. I do know how to look after them. I know to keep them. These are just about coming back to life now. Now, maggots are good anywhere. Now, I know these are going to be there when the carp find it. And the one thing they do is keep carp in the area for longer. And the longer those fish are there, the more likely you are to get a bite. It's like the pellets that dissolve in the water. After 45 minutes, there'll just be some mush on the bottom. But they will dig around trying to find the last morsel of food. And that's probably, that's why you're going to get bites off the spot if the carp come along. I don't put lots and lots of them in, maybe a couple of handfuls, but it's an added attraction. And again, it offers you hook baits, maybe a little bunch of maggots over the top. There's your imitation maggots you can put on the top of your boilies if that's the way you want to go, and it works. It's worked on an awful lot of waters I've gone, obviously, over the years, doing magazine features and fishing for the cameras, making movies. It's worked, and I think it's worked because it sort of covers every option. Winter, a time that can be really grinding on the soul. It's long nights, 16 hours of darkness, and it can play on you. You think you're not getting it right at every turn, but I have always found that you need to be as positive as you possibly can. I hear so many stories of people, moaning and groaning, it's cold and it's horrible. Well, it is. If you want to catch carp in the winter, then those are things you're going to have to put up with. But there are things that you can do that make things that turn the tide a little bit in your way. And I'd like to tell you a couple of stories that I'd learned things over the years, and I was able to apply those things to waters that were, in essence, a long way from my doorstep in Aldershot. And the first one of those was down in Somerset when I was fishing Ashmead pool, owned at the time by a great friend of mine, Skeff, and his whole family they're wonderful people. I loved it down there, but I had one thing on my mind when I got that ticket, and it was a winter ticket to begin with. And I started fishing there in November of 2008, and unbelievably, on my first trip, I caught a beautiful little mirror carp, 21 pound, and it sort of set the ball rolling. It was a long way from home, and I decided that I would do 3 days a week down there, Mondays through to Thursday mornings, and a long old haul. But what it meant was, if I had my wits about me first thing Monday morning when I got there, just before first light, I tried to be opening those gates and gazing across the Avalon Flats with that beautiful lake in front of me. I wanted to find things. I needed to find the fish. I needed to see where they were hanging out. And after about 3 weeks, we're going into December now, I started to find little areas where I would constantly see the odd fish, until eventually I saw the ultimate prize there, which was a fish called single scale. And what I did, I didn't want to fish the spot, but I started to bait a spot where I saw it, and I used to see it lying up in the weed just behind the spot. And when I first put 50 boilies on it, and that's all I ever baited it with, just 50 boilies, that spot got slightly bigger and slightly bigger where the carp were grubbing around it. So I knew, you know, it wasn't the birds were eating it, it was the carp. And I say only 50 boilies, it might seem a lot to some and not very much to another. Pre-baiting in the winter isn't necessarily about the amount of bait you're putting in. It's the regularity with which you do it. That's the important thing. You know, and just keep a little bit of bait going into little spots, and you just keep those fish interested, you keep them coming back. So on Thursday morning before I left, I put 50 baits on that spot. Well, I managed to get away with that for a couple of weeks, but we got into January and the first week or so was not too bad, and the really brutal easterly front came across the country. Things started to freeze. I was on the phone to Mark Walsonham every day, you know, is the lake frozen, is it not, whatever. And I got down there every week, and every week, no matter what happened, I would get some bait on that spot. Whether it was frozen or not, I could wade across a very shallow channel that was something to do with shooting. They used to put stuff in there to the birds, and then they'd shoot them all for whatever reason. And I'd wade across, breaking the ice, and keep the bait going in on that spot. And towards the end of the month, I went down. I'd rung Mark on the Sunday evening, and it was free. No ice on the water, so I belted down the A303 past Stonehenge with my hair on fire, going down to Somerset. And I arrived, I took a wonderful picture of, it's one of my favourite photographs I've ever taken, of a sunrise at Ashmead, coming up the old lake, the sun coming up. It's a beautiful picture, and I had no idea what was going to happen a little less than 24 hours later. And I'd set my trap, and the first time I'd fished that spot, so I put 2 rods on my regular little spots in a bigger bit of water. There was a tiny bit of ice in the margins. I cracked that, and I walked across in my waders and got it in. It's about 4.5 foot deep, this spot, and you could see it got a little bit bigger again from the last time. Again, I put 50 boilies down there. I didn't break anything up. I didn't put any different sizes. I put exactly what they always found there. Slackened the line right off all the way back, and I put the rod down. And, you know, I don't know if it's a premonition or whatever, but I could think of no other fish picking up that hook bait other than single scale. And I even told Lynn I'd tell her how much it weighed come the morning. Well, in the early hours, we're talking 4:30 in the morning on a freezing cold night, that rod ripped off. Now, Ashmead is it's almost like a river runs through it, because the channels are very narrow, and there's some open bits and some closed bits. There's the original old lakes, one of about 2.5 acres and one of 1 acre. Well, this fish had the ability to get so far down past a couple of islands to a more open bit of water further down, probably 50 yards further down, and it was getting there. I picked up the rod, and I'm just hanging on for grim death. Now, anything in shallow water can feel like a monster, can't it? You know, they haven't got depth to work with. All they can do is run away from you. And this fish just kept on running. I worked it back to the first gap that it could have run into, between an island, and as it did so, I just clamped the rod down, and there's no way I could afford to give it any line at all, and it sort of turned and came back into the main channel, and I sort of managed to get it back a little bit, giving a little bit of line and taking a bit. Then the second gap in the island it had to come past, it nearly got into there, and I must admit, at that stage of the game, I didn't think it was a little one. I didn't think it was one of the sort of 20-pound mad atomic powered commons that lived in there. It was just a plunging, big, plodding, powerful fish. And eventually, and I don't normally do this, I put my head torch on. I got back to my Evo bivvy and I got the torch on my head. I put it on the red filter. And as I did so, the rod sort of eased up a bit and the fish came to the surface and rolled on her side. And there it was, the big single scale, staring at me. The picture's imprinted on my mind. And eventually I got her in the net. And I honestly, I had tears in my eyes. I knelt down in the long grass there. There were no sort of real swims as such. It was just a wonderful, natural place to fish. And I just stared into the net. The biggest, I knew it was the biggest carp I'd ever caught in this country. And at 53 pound and 12 ounces she was. And I rang Mark, woke him up, bless him, probably all of his family shouting down the phone as I was. And he said, look, get it in a retainer, I'll be down at first light to see you. And Mark, myself and Single Scale shared the most magical, misty, kind of frosty morning on the Avalon Flats. And to hold her up for the camera was one of the greatest joys of my life. And to catch her at the end of January after the lake had frozen 3 times was amazing. But it just proved that keeping bait going in onto a spot during the colder months pays dividends. We're going to flip the coin and we're going to head east this time, across the Dartford Bridge into deepest, darkest Essex. And I'd got a ticket for a very special Essex syndicate, and I'd fished it a little bit on and off in the year before, but I hadn't really gone there and done the campaign that I wanted to do. There were a couple of fish that I really, really wanted to catch from this fish. I'd had 3 or 4 40s out of there by the time I got to the winter. But one place I saw fish constantly was off this tiny little point that stuck out. If you imagine the shapes, it's like a big L-shaped lake, and the point was on the inside of the L there. And all the fish showed really, really close in. And what I did, instead of fishing it, I went round, in the middle of the day when I didn't think I was going to see anything, but I didn't think the fish would be there. And I just had a little lead around, and all I could find was the bottom of the marginal shelf, which went from not sticky silt, but it was obviously silt, and then you'd pull through the silt and onto the gravel. And those are the sort of spots I like, about 1 metre into that silt. It's not going to be that stinky, horrible black stuff that I know carp feed in anyway, but we're all a little bit frightened of it. And it's just the ideal place. That's where you'd expect the natural food to be. And I started just sprinkling bait along that edge. And unbelievably, on the first time I was on there, I caught one of the fish I was desperate to catch, a fish called the Black Lady at 36 pound and 2 ounces. She was absolutely stunning, but it wasn't winter yet. I can't claim that as a winter catch, although it was in November. The winter for me starts, I'm an old fossil and I can't help it, because each season should be 3 months long, and my winters start on the 1st of December. I got down after that. I could catch one fish every 2-day session down there, and I was not very well at the time. I was living on a lot of pills to keep me up and keep me going in the right direction. And I set up one night, and I sort of got to a point where I knew I could get a bite, but I didn't know what it would be. All the fish I caught out of that lake were special. And at the start of this, I think it was the 1st of December that year, this is 2018, I had that one bite, and it was a very special fish. Slate Grey, he was called, 42 pound. And, I thought that was probably as good as it was to get with winter coming on. But when I packed up, again, I spread some bait at the bottom of that shelf, and I got back the following week. Bright and breezy on the Sunday morning, and on the Monday morning, sorry, and I went straight round. I literally put my up baits down on the bottom of the shelf, little mesh bags with 4, maybe 5 15mm boilies in, 10 millers, and a little bit crumbed up, you know, on a leg clip, just at the bottom of the shelf, slacking the lines off, bobbins on the floor. There's only one way those fish were going to run, and that was away from you. The second morning I was there, the bobbin had cracked into the rod, and I did a battle. It was an incredible battle. I had to get my chest waders on completely. I had to wade around the bush off the end of this point, and I landed it from a swim right round the corner to the left. It was just a completely unbelievable fight. Again, in the red filter of my head torch, there was the fish I really, really wanted to catch, the brown fish. And she lay there in the net, and it was like, you know, I'd done everything that I wanted to do there. And I got her up on the bank. She was 41 pounds and 2 ounces, and she's a real handsome fish, not like the old fish like Malins from Raysbury or the Dustbin from the Car Park Lake, that kind of fish to me. And I got her on the back, and we did the photographs in the morning. Well, I had to do self-takes, and I got a bit of footage with it on my camera, and it was like, because I was on my own, I could look back, and you tend to, instead of just talking about it with someone, you talk to yourself and look back on what you did, and the constant putting the bait in, getting round there. If I wasn't going to fish there, I didn't see fish there, I went round and put bait there, and kept it there, you know, going all the time. And through the winter, those fish got on it, and they ate it. And I'd just like to sort of reiterate the point that those spots were never fed with, I put 3 kilo boilies in and reap the rewards. It wasn't like that. There's 40 or 50 baits on that Essex spot. Just a line at the bottom of the shelf was enough to make sure the fish came back. And yeah, it's hard work in carp fishing, even in today's environment. I think still gets you the prizes. Winter carp fishing, not everybody's cup of tea, and you can witness that. You know, when the clocks go forward in the spring and back in the fall, it's you know, the lakes become quiet in that winter period, and so, you know, not everybody's doing it. I don't understand why, because it might surprise you, but winter is my favourite time for carp fishing. I love it. They're very often at their biggest weights. They look absolutely stunning when they've darkened up as the water gets clearer, and the joy and the challenge that creates is what I'm after. And as I said, it's not everybody's cup of tea, but it can be. It's wonderful. If you've got a friend who wants to go fishing with you, then great. It will jolly it up. You can share the challenge between the pair of you and have the odd social along the way. The biggest thing of all, probably though, is selecting the correct venue. Fishing the lake with very few carp in it in the summer, wonderful, chase those fish around and maybe catch a couple. But in the winter, that's a different proposition. There are lots and lots, especially day ticket lakes now, with plenty of carp in that allow you to, you know, you'll be able to catch. There's more likely you're going to get a bite. And much of that becomes from the pressure that those fish are under. Leads hitting the water, spoms hitting the water, a lot of noise on the bank. It always keeps on carp on the move. And whilst those fish are on the move, they are infinitely more catchable than one that's just holed up in a comfortable area. It's not everybody's cup of tea, as I keep on saying, but believe me, the rewards are there, and they're rewards that you'll cherish for the rest of your life. Well, that, unfortunately, is my 24 hours has come to a close here in Essex. It hasn't happened, unfortunately, but then it doesn't always in the winter time. But I hope my pearls of wisdom will help all of you to catch a carp. Remember, be patient, do it right, and it'll happen.